It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon at the roadside cafe near the military base. The kind of place where truckers mixed with Marines, and where the coffee came strong and the respect came easy, at least that's how it used to be. Her name was Emily. She wasn't the owner, just a waitress. Mid-30s, single mom, barely keeping up with the bills. But everyone knew she had the kind of warmth you couldn't fake. Polite to everyone. Always checking if your fries were hot. Always smiling, even when her shift dragged past 10 hours. That's why what happened that day didn't make sense. Around 2:15 p.m., an elderly man walked in. Slender frame. Gray cap with a faded patch that read Vietnam veteran. His gait was slow, but his eyes were alert. Emily greeted him like she did everyone else. "Coffee, sir. Anything to eat today?" He hesitated. "Just coffee. I'll pay next time, they cut my check late again." Without a second thought, Emily poured the coffee, added a slice of warm apple pie, and said, "It's taken care of. Sit wherever you like." She didn't know that her manager, Craig, had been watching from the corner. By the time the old vet left, full, thankful, and smiling faintly, Craig had already stormed from the office. "What was that?" he barked. Emily blinked. "He couldn't pay today. He's a vet." "It's just pie and coffee," Craig slammed a clipboard on the counter. "We're not running a charity. One more stunt like that, and you're done here." "Understood." Emily didn't argue. She just nodded and wiped her hands on her apron. But a pair of Marines sitting in the booth near the window had heard everything. And they were not okay with it. The two Marines didn't say anything right away. They watched Emily retreat to the back of the cafe, shoulders stiff, face drained of color. They were both in uniform, Corporal Jenkins and Sergeant Morales, and had seen their share of injustice overseas. But this? This hit a nerve. Jenkins clenched his jaw. "He had a Vietnam patch, Sarge." "I saw," Morales replied, voice low. "And I saw her get humiliated for doing what was right." They finished their meals, tossed a tip far bigger than their bill on the table, and left without another word. But they weren't done. That evening, the story started circulating. Jenkins posted about it in a private military forum, along with a photo of Emily behind the counter and a description of what happened. He didn't name the cafe directly, not yet, but it didn't matter. The community recognized the layout. And they recognized Emily. Comments exploded. "That was Emily. I remember her from when I was stationed there. She always treated my dad like gold. This is disgusting. We need to show up." By morning, the cafe slot was packed. But these weren't your usual breakfast goers. These were Marines, off-duty, in civvies, boots still muddy from the base, and eyes sharp. Inside, Craig didn't know yet. He just noticed that the bell over the door wouldn't stop ringing. And they weren't there for pancakes. They were there for Emily. Emily showed up just before her shift at 7 a.m. She wasn't expecting anything unusual, maybe a few regulars, maybe a quiet morning to recover from the embarrassment of yesterday. But when she stepped into the parking lot, her heart skipped a beat. Dozens of Marines were standing outside. Some leaned against cars. Others stood in formation, arms crossed. A few held coffee in hand, but none looked casual. It felt organized, intentional. She slowed as she approached the door, unsure. Had something happened? Was there an emergency? Then she heard it. "Ma'am," a voice called out. Jenkins stepped forward and offered a sharp salute. "We're here for you." Emily blinked. "What?" Morales came up beside him. "We heard what happened. You honored a vet, and your manager tried to make you feel like you did something wrong. You didn't. You did what most people wouldn't." Emily looked overwhelmed. "I just gave him pie." "You gave him respect," Jenkins said. And that's more than some people have in a whole lifetime. Behind them, one of the Marines handed her a small envelope. Inside was a note, for the coffee. For the pie. For the kindness. It was stuffed with cash, at least a few $100s. Emily didn't know what to say. Her eyes welled up, but before she could speak, the cafe door burst open. Craig stepped outside, clearly rattled. What the hell is this? Why are all of you here? Morales turned, voice calm but firm. We're customers. That a problem? Craig's eyes darted over the crowd, clearly sensing he was outnumbered. Then Jenkins added, we're also witnesses. And if you think this ends with yelling at a waitress for helping a vet, you've got a bigger problem than you realize. Craig froze. He hadn't expected pushback. And the Marines weren't finished yet. Craig's face turned red, but he was clearly out of his depth. He looked around, probably realizing that even if he called the police, it wouldn't matter. These weren't rowdy kids or trespassers, these were servicemen, calm, collected, and very serious. I don't need this circus outside my business, Craig muttered. You're disrupting customers. Morales stepped forward, his tone steady but steely. Your customers are right here. And we're not here to cause trouble. We're here to stand with the one person in that building who still remembers what respect looks like. Emily tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. The show of solidarity was overwhelming. A few more cars were pulling into the lot. Off-duty paramedics, a couple of local veterans, people from the community who had seen the post and decided to come stand beside her. Inside the cafe, a few of the regular customers began to notice something was up. One older man stood from his booth and walked to the window, squinting out at the sea of uniforms. What's going on? He asked. The teenager at the counter replied, I think it's for Emily. Craig glanced inside and saw the crowd growing, not shrinking. This wasn't going to fade. I'm not going to fire her, he snapped, trying to save face. This is being blown out of proportion. Morales tilted his head. You already threatened her. We all heard what happened. And we've got it on video, another voice added. A young woman, early 20s, holding up her phone. Craig paled. That's when a silence swept the group, heavy, expectant. Jenkins stepped forward again, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. You want to run a business near a base? Then learn something. We take care of our own. He turned to Emily. If he won't stand behind you, we will. And we're not going anywhere. Emily nodded, her voice finally breaking through. Thank you. All of you. And just like that, the crowd of Marines didn't leave. They walked inside, all of them, and filled every booth, every stool, every inch of the cafe. Quiet. Polite. But unshakably present. Craig was boxed in now. The cafe had never been this full. Uniforms and boots filled every corner, the hum of conversation low but purposeful. Emily moved behind the counter like she always did, polite, efficient, but this time, her hands shook for a different reason. It wasn't fear. It was gratitude. Craig hovered awkwardly near the kitchen door, clearly rattled. Every time he glanced at a customer, he was met with a steady gaze. These weren't men and women you could intimidate. And they weren't just here for pancakes. One by one, they came to the counter. Some just ordered coffee. Some left $20 tips for a $5 breakfast. A few quietly slid folded bills into a donation jar someone had placed next to the register, a jar labeled in Sharpie, for Emily. For honor. Even a few of the regular customers joined in. A middle-aged woman leaned over and whispered, I saw it on the news feed last night. You did the right thing. Don't let him make you doubt that. Emily gave a small nod, her throat tight. By mid-morning, something changed. 2 reporters showed up, local news. Word had spread, fast. They asked to speak to the waitress from the veteran story. Emily hesitated, but Morales stepped in. She didn't ask for attention, he said firmly. We came to stand up for her because she's the kind of person the world needs more of. Then, turning to Emily, he added, you've got nothing to be ashamed of. You reminded us that dignity doesn't cost anything. Craig watched all of this unfold, sweating. His business was on the verge of becoming a viral cautionary tale. And then it got worse, for him. The cafe phone rang. It was the base commander. And he was not happy. Craig picked up the phone behind the counter, trying to sound composed. Hello, this is Craig, manager of. The voice on the other end cut him off sharply. This is Colonel R.L. Mathis from the base. I just got briefed on what happened at your cafe. I suggest you sit down. Craig swallowed hard and ducked into the back office, shutting the door behind him. But the Marines out front noticed his body language, tense, cornered, and suddenly unsure. Inside, Craig listened as the colonel continued, we send hundreds of Marines through your business every month. I've personally eaten there with my men. But let me be clear, disrespecting someone for serving a veteran is not just bad optics, it's a disgrace. You have one chance to correct this before I make sure every unit knows to take their business elsewhere. Craig stammered, Sir, it was a misunderstanding, no. It wasn't, the colonel interrupted. We've got statements. Video. Witnesses. If you don't issue a formal apology, not just to her, but to every vet who walks through your door, we'll see to it that your parking lot stays empty for a very long time. The line clicked dead. Craig stood frozen for a moment, then slowly walked back into the cafe. Emily was pouring coffee for an older couple when he approached. Everyone turned to look. He cleared his throat. I want to make something clear, Craig began, voice shaky but loud enough for the room to hear. I was wrong. I acted poorly yesterday. Emily was just doing the right thing. And I owe her, and all of you, a sincere apology. Silence. Then Jenkins stood up. You apologize to her directly. Not to the room. Craig turned to Emily, eyes uncertain. Emily. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have been reprimanded. I let the wrong priorities guide me, and I promise it won't happen again. Emily stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Thank you. But it wasn't over. Morales stepped up next to her. An apology's a start. But we'll be watching. Because respect isn't something you give once. It's something you prove. And everyone in that room knew Craig had just been put on probation, not by corporate, but by the community itself. Craig retreated to the back office again, his pride bruised but his business still barely intact. Outside, the mood had shifted. Tension had given way to unity. Marines were chatting quietly over breakfast, veterans shook hands with strangers, and Emily, for the first time in 24 hours, allowed herself to breathe. She moved from table to table, taking orders, refilling mugs, and receiving small words of encouragement every few steps. You did the right thing. You remind me of my daughter. My dad would have cried if he saw what you did for that old vet. At one table, a young recruit held out a challenge coin. Ma'am, this is from my unit. We only give these to people who've earned real respect. You did. Emily blinked. She had seen challenge coins before but never been offered one. With shaking fingers, she accepted it. Thank you, she whispered. Another customer approached, the older man she had served the day before. The Vietnam vet. He shuffled in with a cane, holding his cap in his hand. I heard what happened after I left, he said quietly. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. You didn't, Emily replied, her voice firm. You reminded people what matters. He smiled, then looked around the room. I haven't seen this much respect in years. Behind them, someone clinked a fork against a glass to get the room's attention. It was Sergeant Morales again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take much of your time. But I think we all agree this place needs a little recognition." He turned to Emily. "So with everyone's blessing, we've decided to start something. A monthly fund, to cover meals for any vet who walks in here and needs it." Applause broke out. Loud. Full. Raw. And Emily just stood there, hand over her heart, stunned. Not only had she kept her job, she had become the reason that cafe would never be the same again. The fun didn't take long to get started. By the next morning, a simple glass box appeared on the counter, labeled in bold black marker, "Veterans Table," in honor of those who served. And it didn't stay empty for long. Customers, military and civilian alike, dropped in bills without a second thought. Some left handwritten notes with their donations, "For my granddad, who never talked about Korea but always remembered the coffee. In memory of Sergeant D. Palmer, Semper Fi." Because no vet should ever be told they don't deserve pie. Even people who couldn't stay long came in just to contribute. Truckers. Nurses. Teachers. One kid from the high school football team walked in, handed over $20, and walked out without saying a word. Within 3 days, the box was overflowing. Emily took a photo of it and pinned it to the wall near the register with the caption, "Look what kindness built." Craig kept a low profile during those days. He stopped hovering, stopped interfering. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was self-preservation. Either way, he let Emily handle things, and business boomed because of it. News crews showed up again by the weekend. Not because of the controversy, that moment had passed, but because of what followed. The cafe, once just a roadside stop, had become a local symbol of dignity. A few reporters asked to speak with Emily again, but she politely declined. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just gave a man a slice of pie and a little bit of respect." But others knew better. They knew it had started with her. By Sunday, the Marines returned, not to protest, but to eat. Quiet, loyal, and always tipping like it was payday. They didn't come for the food anymore. They came for the message. Sunday afternoon brought something Emily hadn't expected, a man in dress blues standing just outside the cafe. He wasn't young, but he stood tall, posture crisp. He waited politely until the lunch rush slowed, then stepped inside. "Ma'am," he said, removing his cap. "I'm Major Harlan. I was sent by the Commandant's office." Emily blinked. "Commandant, of the Marine Corps?" "Yes, ma'am." The cafe went quiet again, as it always seemed to when something big was about to happen. A few Marines at nearby tables stood up out of respect. Major Harlan continued, "We heard about what you did." The gesture itself was simple, but the impact was enormous. It reminded a lot of people what service looks like on the home front. He reached into a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a polished medallion encased in glass. Etched into the top was the Marine Corps emblem, and below it, "For civilian honor and dedication, Semper Fidelis." Emily gasped. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Major Harlan said. "You've already done it." He handed her the medallion, then offered a quiet salute. Emily, flustered but trying to hold back tears, gave a small, unsteady one in return. The room filled with quiet applause. No one cheered. No one shouted. Because in that moment, they all understood. She hadn't just served a soldier a slice of pie. She had reminded a nation, or at least their corner of it, what respect, quiet courage, and simple humanity could still look like. And the Marines? They never forgot. In the weeks that followed, the cafe transformed. Not in its decor, the booths were still chipped, the coffee still strong, the pie still warm. But in its spirit. It was no longer just a pit stop. It had become a place where honor lingered in the air like the smell of breakfast grease and fresh brew. Veterans began visiting from out of town, some just to shake Emily's hand. Photos of service members lined the walls now, sent in by families, hung with care next to the Veterans Table Fund, which had become permanent. Emily never sought the spotlight. She still wore the same apron, still swept the same corners, still wiped down the counter after every rush. But her name was known now, quietly passed from Marine to Marine, from base to base. They called her the one who stood up without standing tall. Even Craig changed. He never regained full respect, but he kept his distance, signed off on the Veterans Fund as a permanent policy, and let Emily handle the front. Business soared, not from viral fame, but from something better, trust. One night, well after closing, Emily sat alone in the cafe, the medallion box open in front of her. The place was quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the faint hum of the fridge. She sipped a cup of black coffee and looked at the photo someone had taped next to the register, a still frame from that first day, her standing behind the counter, the old vet smiling at her, unaware that the small act of kindness would ripple so far. She smiled softly, whispered to herself, it was just a slice of pie. But in a world that sometimes forgets, that one slice meant everything.